Immigration continues to be the disaster issue for the Republican Party. The president's new policy on young undocumented immigrants is making things even worse for the GOP. They don't know which way to turn. Watch how Mitt Romney and how many times Mitt Romney avoided a direct question about the policy on CBS yesterday.
Would you repeal this order if you became president?
Well, let's step back and look at the issue. I mean, first of all, we have to secure the border. I don't know why he feels stopgap measures are the right way to go.
Well, what would you do about it?
Well, as you know, he was president for the last 3.5 years, did nothing on immigration.
But would you repeal this?
Well, it would be overtaken by events, if you will, by virtue of my putting in place a long-term solution.
Would you leave this in place while you worked out a long-term solution, or would you just repeal it?
We'll look at that. We'll look at that setting as we reach that.
This is a far cry from the direct answer Mitt Romney gave about the DREAM Act on the campaign trail.
The question is, if I were elected and Congress were to pass the DREAM Act, would I veto it? And the answer is yes.
This underscores the absolute absence of a core of Mitt Romney. Who is this man that wants to be president? He refuses to take a stand on the tough issues time and time again. Romney is trying to walk I guess you could say, a fine line between the majority of Americans and the lunatic fringe of the Republican Party. Now, must be pointed out, some of the most outspoken voices from the right wing have come out in support of the president's new policy.
How can you blame kids when they're dragged to the USA from wherever? If you're a fair person, you can't.
I think it's a sensible policy. I think it would be much better if that were the law of the land.
Romney has a big hole to dig out of, because if he gets under, say, the 31% of Hispanic voters that McCain got, he's going to lose.
So here we are. Romney has to serve two masters. He has to please a general election audience, but he also has to, I guess you say, bow to the Tea Party leaders in Congress like Steve King, who said this today: I'm prepared to bring a suit and seek a court order to stop implementation of this policy. Loose cannon Congressman Allen West of Florida also put Romney in a pretty tight spot. West said this morning that Romney's reaction to the new policy was this: I feel a little bit dejected because I think it goes back to what my mother taught me. A man must stand for something or else he'll fall for everything. Now, the Republicans also have to deal with these Tea Partiers going on television and making the situation even worse.
You're also talking about people that came over at 16 years of age. I mean, at that point, you had a say in it, and that looks kind of more like amnesty.
Do you think a 16-year-old whose parents are coming across the border has a say in whether or not they're just going to stay behind in their country and let their parents
they're certainly in a position to have a conversation with their parents about it.
A 16-year-old is in a position to have a conversation with their parents about coming across the border, you think?
Believe me, my 16-year-old daughter has given me some input on everything that, pretty much everything the family wants to do.
Of course, Fox News isn't helping matters for Mitt Romney with all the falsehoods like this.
They could have a major wave, a major spike of illegal immigration in the short term, with people thinking, hey, here's my window of opportunity to get my kids, a place to stay in America.
Right, so now's the time to go running over the border.
There will not be any new wave of immigrants because of this policy. That's what we all need to know. The policy only applies to young people who have been here for at least 5 years. Pretty reasonable stuff, isn't it? It also is not an executive order. It's known as a deferred action from the Department of Homeland Security. Now, this is a power granted to the Department of Homeland Security under George W. Bush in 2003, and I think Bush knows a thing or two about radical right-wingers fighting against immigration reform. His steps towards immigration reform were stomped out by Republicans, his own party, in 2007. Republicans, no doubt, are the party of obstruction when it comes to immigration. They love cheap labor. They don't mind these folks coming across the border. But now they act like, oh, this is the Democrats. This has been their problem. Listen to Senator Marco Rubio of Florida in an interview with ABC News.
The White House never called us about this. No one reached out to us and told us this was on its way. I mean, if they were serious about a real solution to this problem and not politicizing it, then why don't you reach out to people?
Answer this. Why does the White House have to reach out and go over to Marco Rubio? Because he's been in the Senate for less than 2 years. Rubio says he's working with Democrats on his own immigration reform legislation, but he conveniently does not name any of these Democrats. I haven't seen any Democrats go on TV saying, doggone it, I was really working with Marco Rubio on this. I can't believe the president did that. They also have not offered up any solutions. Meanwhile, 2011, here are the numbers, saw a record-breaking amount of enforced deportations. How come Bush didn't do this? Nearly 400,000. Now let's talk about border security. The size of the U.S. Border Patrol is more than twice the size it was in 2004. So in that sound clip that you just saw of Mitt Romney moments ago talking about border control, that's exactly what President Obama has done. He has resourced the border. The increased enforcement and resources are all part of immigration reform. You got to support the border first. And so the president has done that. And so is the president's recent announcement. Here come the polls. They show very positive results. A new Gallup poll shows opposition to immigration at an all-time low at 35%. It was at 50% 3 years ago. Now, 49% of Latino voters surveyed after the president's announcement say it makes them more enthusiastic to vote for him. The president's latest immigration strategy is good politics. It's also damn good policy. It does something for people. Isn't that what government's supposed to do? The Republicans are having a real hard time dealing with all of this. And they should, because they have sat on the sideline and stopped this president on everything he's ever wanted to do. Get this. The party of obstruction is now telling the Democrats, well, you're the problem we don't have immigration reform in this country. President Obama has dealt with it. He has resourced the border. We don't hear a whole lot about, gosh, people are just pouring over the border from Mexico anymore. That conversation has been diminished quite a bit. That's because when it comes to resources and technology and people, the president has answered the call. And now they're coming back saying, well, gosh, he really hasn't done anything. Get your cell phones out. I want to know what you think. Tonight's question, will Mitt Romney ever take a firm stance on anything? Text A for yes, text B for no to 622-639. You can go to our blog at ed.msnbc.com. We'll bring you the results later on in the show. Joining me tonight is Congressman Luis Gutierrez of Illinois, who has been on the forefront of immigration in this country and issues. He knows more about it than anybody in the Congress. Congressman, good to have you with us tonight. I appreciate your time on this issue.
Thank you, Ed.
Well,
Thank you.
Is the president doing the right thing? Is this the right move? I don't care if it's a political move because it's going to help people, and that's what this is all about, and it's forwarding the conversation in the country. What do you make of the president's move?
Look, I mean, when I hear Romney say that we haven't done anything, what about December 2010? The House of Representatives passed the DREAM Act, 216 to 198, 208 Democrats and 8 Republicans. The very next week in the Senate, what was it? It was 55 votes for cloture. 51 Democrats, 4 Republicans. There were Republican senators who had been co-sponsors of the DREAM Act that wouldn't vote for cloture. And then they say we haven't been trying. Look, what the president's action is a reflection of the will of the nation, of both House of Representatives and the Senate. And he has freed 800,000 people. His promise, and the promise that I made along with Senator McCain and Kennedy and Congressman Flake, who's now running for the Senate in the state of Arizona, we introduced bipartisan, bicameral legislation for comprehensive immigration reform in 2004. And what did we say? We want to bring people out of the shadows. Well, you know, I guess if I said I wanted to increase the minimum wage by $1, and I couldn't get it through the Congress, and the president did it, you'd think I'd say, thank you, Mr. President, for accomplishing that public policy. If I said I wanted to do something and I couldn't get it through the Congress, you might think. So all the president has done is do through executive action exactly what Marco Rubio's legislation would have done. Give them a work visa, which is renewable. Would his have been permanent? Absolutely. But this is a solution to a problem.
Well, I think this is an important point because Rubio's saying nobody talked to him. First of all, I don't know any Democrats who are really working hand in hand with him on this anyway. It's an election year. No legislation is going to get passed right now. So it's a political move. So what? It helps people. But the point I want to make with you is, where does this leave the president if he gets reelected? If the president gets reelected, it would seem to me that this is going to be the issue. What about that?
Here, let me just say the following. You saw that poll, 49% Latinos more likely, looking at this favor, more likely to vote for him. Look, Ed, wait for 2 months down the road when tens of thousands of people make lines, young people, smart people, Americans, when people start talking to them and seeing the people in the lines and you see them getting their work permits and their work documents. Wait till that. This is, for the Latino community, a real civil rights issue, of bringing people fairness and making the Justice Department and our system respect their family values. Just wait till those kids line up and you see the happiness. America is a country that loves its children, and these are children. Well, this argument that 16-year-olds make decisions, let me just tell you, that's the extreme point. Most of the kids I met today, Ed, were 9 months old and 2 years old and 3 and 4 years old when they came to this country. But even if they were 15 years and 364 days, I was that age. If my dad said we're going, that's where we were going, and you followed your parents' lead. They didn't have a choice in this matter. They're here in this country. We should embrace them.
Congressman, great to have you with us tonight. Luis Gutierrez from Chicago.
Thank you so
great to have
much.
you on the program. Thank you. Now let's turn to Joan Walsh, editor-at-large of Salon.com. Well, Joan, what do you say to these Republicans who say that the Democrats, they had the majority, you know, after Al Franken came in after that long battle, you know, and they got 60 votes. How come the Democrats didn't do it then? What do you think?
Oh, I was so glad to hear Representative Gutierrez lay it out like that with the number of votes passing, that it did pass the House, Ed, and that it should have passed the Senate if we were abiding by real Democratic rules, but it couldn't get cloture, and that it was abandoned by some Republicans who had traditionally supported it. So, you know, it's very important to remember that the president acted because he couldn't get action from the Republicans in Congress. It's so hypocritical.
This is Harry Reid on the Senate floor today. He made that point. Here it is.
I was stunned listening to the Republican nominee for president say, why doesn't Congress do this? Mr. President, we've tried. We can't get Republican votes.
So when you look at what the Democrats had, they had the supermajority from July 7th, 2009 until February 4th of 2010. Let's see, there was the auto loan going on, there was an economy that had to be rebuilt, there was a stimulus package going on, there was a war that was winding down in Iraq. Who in this country was talking about immigration reform at the time? And now the Republicans are coming out saying, well, gosh, you know, you Democrats are the problems here. They don't have a leg to stand on, do they?
No, I mean, Senator Reid was absolutely right. And you know, the other thing that's been very interesting to watch now, Ed, is Mitt Romney is in a kind of straitjacket. When you have Marco Rubio going out and saying, you know, maybe this really isn't very unfair to send these kids back when, you know, they had no choice in coming and they've been great students. I mean, we've invested so much in a lot of these kids as Americans, you know, to keep them here is great for the country. But Mitt Romney made a calculated decision to move to the right during the primaries, baiting Rick Perry for having the Texas version of the DREAM Act, and now he's got to live with it, and that's why you've got him with Bob Schieffer just, you know, but 5 times, not really being able to give a straight answer.
It's a running theme on this show. The question is, will the real Mitt Romney please stand up? Once again, we can't find the guy. Joan Walsh, great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.